This is one of my genealogical lines. Interestingly, some of the names on here that I choose not to reveal on this record are names that are also on Sherman Island's genealogy. This really turns out to be one of the more grave issues in the CCH, and I would exhort you to pay serious attention to its resolution, as it will be referred to later in this presentation.
We're going to back up a little
After all, the question should really be whether petitioners are native Hawaiian cultural practitioners, and not necessarily who their specific ancestors are or when they lived. It should be sufficient to simply state under oath that one is a qualified native Hawaiian cultural practitioner. Facetiously, should the state start issuing licenses to those who may qualify as native Hawaiian cultural practitioners? I don't think so. For the HO and BLR to insist on such a rigid and arid requirement as Halapi Prong 2 and try to coerce native Hawaiian cultural practitioners here into violating their family kapu with such requirements is preposterous. But getting back to the CDUA. Because TMT Observatory Corporation is the party that requires a permit to build a gigantic 18-story telescope, one would expect it to also be the party to submit the CDUA to BLNR, right? Wrong. The applicant is UH Hilo. The CDUA does not contain a single signature of any authorized TMT person. As an additional point of interest, while one would expect the TMT Corp to be the party opposing the petitioners in the contested case hearing, as you already know, again, it is not TMT Corp, but UH Hilo. Of course, with UH Hilo as the applicant, one would then naturally assume that a legal relationship exists between it and TMT Observatory Corporation, right? Wrong again. There is no operating agreement between the two. So how can UH Hilo legally submit an application for a third-party performer that it has no legal relationship with, such party being responsible for completing the proposed project? In a sane, logical, and legal world, the existence of such an agreement would be fundamental, expected, and required, if only to delineate the rights and obligations of the parties involved. The involvement of UH Hilo in the application process seems to be as a volunteer, facilitator, or initiator, with no legal relationship with the party that's supposed to perform all the obligations that would be included with the granting of a permit, if indeed one is finalized. Additionally, UH Hilo, as an entity of the University of Hawaii, holder of the general lease for Mauna Kea, may have a conflict of interest in all of these dealings. Furthermore, that the actual party in interest, the hopefully responsible party that will raise the funds, submit the designs, comply with all the laws, rules, and regulations, and build the building and its instrumental contents, is a corporation without a corporate history, corporate success, corporate assets, etc., should raise an entire battery of questions. What is the TMT Observatory Corporation's corporate credibility and creditability? Not one single iota of this necessary information is in evidence, and no one of consequence, including BLNR, is asking questions about them. So, while there is privity, a legal relationship between BLNR and UH Hilo because of the CDUA, there is no privity between UH Hilo and TMT. Therefore, there is no legal relationship between BLNR and TMT. And except for the granting of a CDUP with its conditions, no conduit through its legal communications and relations can take place. It continues to be interesting that, so far, the legal and other expenses for the TMT are over $1 million and rising. Of course, the beneficiary of whatever benefits should accrue, TMT, is picking up the tab, right? Wrong again. This is the University of Hawaii, and you, the taxpayer, who are footing the bill. Furthermore, one would expect that TMT Corp, the performer, would be responsible to produce a necessary environmental impact statement. Well, not so. It was UH Hilo's attorneys who hired the firm during the EIS. And it's supposed that whomever does the hiring also pays for the service. But remember, there's no operating agreement. So how could there be an arrangement? I'm afraid that again the taxpayer is footing the bill. Credit must be given to the TMT Corp personnel who creatively engineered this business plan to get these multi-million-dollar benefits and not have to pay for them. There doesn't seem to be any provision for a subsequent payback either, because there is no agreement that specifies the situation. In fact, further examination reveals that TMT doesn't even have a sublease on which you can build a telescope that UH Hilo has applied for it to build. And as a consequence of this situation, the rent that DLNR should be evaluating for adequacy and compliance is nowhere in sight. Will the amount of rent, when it eventually appears, satisfy the recommendations of DLNR relative to the CDUA that states that TMT remains committed to paying a substantial amount for sublease rent? More so, we also need to be reminded that the individual shareholder members or whatever the constituents of this TMT corporation are, normally by law, not liable for the liabilities of the corporation. In other words, not even the sovereign nation states involved are liable for payment. Benefits with no liabilities. Who said there is no free lunch? Well, it is common, if not a necessary practice, that corporations without a history of successes and inadequate credit rating usually require personal guarantees in its commercial transactions to guarantee full performance for its undertakings in case of unexpected contingencies. None has been provided for or required in this situation. Is this reasonable and prudent on DLNR's part? With little or no practical experience, defective decision-making becomes a real possibility. How does DLNR protect the so-called state and its beneficiaries from such contingencies? So whether it is the applicant, in this case UH Hilo, or the builder-operator, TMT Observatory Corporation, DLNR should require that one or both of them provide guarantee surety of such proportion to secure and or ensure that, once started, this project will go to full completion. 20% of the fees collected by the Mauna Kea Land Special Fund, HRS 304A 2170, are being set aside for payment to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Precedent has been set. It is suggested that this arrangement be further documented in any CDUP that may be granted. While existing telescopes provide viewing time to UH in lieu of rent, no proportion of the equivalent value have ever been shared with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs for its 20% share of all rental proceeds, as far as I know. The proposed CDUP, among other things, does not mention viewing time in any of its discussions. Not only should the subject of viewing time be included in the CDUP, but that 20% of the equivalent value for viewing time to be shared with all should be mandated. Curiously, TMT will color the pavement of the accessway, the roadway to the observatory, then with the surroundings. And the HO has gone along with the suggestion that the coating of the dome will be a reflective aluminum-like coating which will reflect the sky during the day, reducing visibility. To claim that a reflective aluminum-like coating reflects the blue colors of the sky seems to be a figment of somebody's PR myth, surely not reality. In my observation, other aluminized domes presently on Mauna Kea have always reflected the glare of the sun, but never a blue sky. If the roadway and supporting buildings are colored to blend with the surroundings, then I would suggest, even required, to maintain consistency of argument that the dome be colored likewise. After all, my view of an eventual TMT observatory, if it should be built, will be from Waimea, and the dome, colored like its surroundings, will be more tolerable if blended rather than glaring. Relative to spatial relationships in Mauna Kea, the university moves its different physical orientations either from being close to the other observatories of the summit area or at a great distance from them, depending on the advantages or disadvantages of the issue it is addressing. For example, regarding Section 13.5.30C5 Hawaii Administrative Rules that states, the proposed land use shall be compatible with the locality and surrounding areas, appropriate to the physical conditions and capabilities of the specific parcel or parcels. It is so understandable that the university would take a close-in perspective for this one, that the proposed TMT observatory would be compatible with the locality and surrounding areas of the other observatories, although the actual proposed TMT observatory location is over a quarter-mile away, except for the sub-millimeter array from the nearest other observatory. A quick glance at a map clearly shows how remote the proposed TMT observatory is from the cluster of summit observatories. On the other hand, it's undisputed, paragraph 91 of HO's conclusions of law, that cumulative effects of astronomical development and other uses in the summit area of Mauna Kea have previously resulted in significant and adverse impacts. The trick here is to locate the TMT observatory as far away from the summit area as possible so as to argue that TMT observatory impacts will be minimally cumulative to the significant and adverse impacts undisputedly having already tainted the summit area. Either the TMT observatory is near the summit cluster of observatories, or it isn't. It cannot be close for some arguments and far for others. After all, one of the laws of physics is that a thing cannot be in two different places at the same time. Pu'upoliahu is the major physical feature on the west side of the Mauna Kea summit area. I can attest to the height of the Pu because it is a challenging height to the top of its summit. While the sheer size of the proposed TMT for a man-made object, being approximately 1/3 of Pu'upoliahu's height, is monstrous. Moreover, how can the addition of the proposed TMT observatory with spatial dimensions, width, length, and height, practically dwarfing the total of other observatories on Mauna Kea, already declared to constitute significant and adverse impacts, not cumulatively add additional significant and adverse impacts, and not violate the threshold of being significant and adverse, as the HO suggests? While such mental hocus-pocus, along with alchemy and witchcraft, might have attained credibility in the Dark Ages, my modern mind tells me that one cannot subtract or mitigate by adding. The summit area of Mauna Kea is substantially developed. That it occurs in the conservation zone is as mythical as the existence of unicorns. The conservation zone in the summit area has been totally decharacterized by observatories. It is so totally developed that there is no room on it to build a gargantuan facility such as the 30-meter telescope. The character of the summit of Mauna Kea would not be further developed, even if the heart of Waikiki were to be transported to the mountain. But such development is not allowed in a conservation district, and therefore is not allowed atop Mauna Kea. That there are no guidelines in existence regarding development limits on the mountain is a travesty. It was a major oversight to not have been included in the comprehensive management plan. Moreover, that the negative impact on the mountain is characterized by the number of telescopes on the mountain and not by their sizes and heights. The actual impact of their existence seems to be a fallacy. After all, 10 TMT-sized observatories would have a mega impact on the mountain.